Commander Zaxthal of the Catharian Third Fleet had seen many species fall before the might of the Dominion. The crystalline Veltari had surrendered after losing 3 worlds. The gas-dwelling Nephim had negotiated peace before a single shot was fired. Even the warrior clans of Drakmor had bent the knee after witnessing orbital bombardments from safe distances. But humans were different, disturbingly different. Zaxthal stood in the command center of his dreadnought, watching tactical displays that made no sense. The human homeworld of Earth should have fallen weeks ago. Their technology was primitive by Dominion standards. Their ships were crude metal constructs held together with what appeared to be welded plates and desperation. Their weapons fired simple kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams that barely registered on Catharian shields. Yet here they were, still fighting. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Veska. Her 4 arms danced across holographic controls with practiced precision. "Put it through," Zaxthal replied, his mandibles clicking in annoyance. The main screen flickered, revealing the scarred face of Admiral Sarah Chen. Her uniform was torn, blood trickled from a cut above her left eye, and her command bridge showed obvious battle damage behind her. But her eyes burned with something Zaxthal had never seen before in a defeated species: absolute defiance. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. I'm calling to discuss terms," she said. Finally, Zaxthal thought, "I'm pleased you've come to your senses, Admiral. The terms are simple: complete and unconditional surrender. Your fleets will stand down, your planetary defenses will be deactivated, and your government will formally submit to Dominion rule." Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, Commander. I'm not calling to surrender. I'm calling to offer you terms." The bridge fell silent. Several of Zaxthal's officers made choking sounds that might have been laughter if the situation weren't so absurd. "You're offering me terms?" Zaxthal's translator struggled to convey his incredulous tone. "Your fleet is outnumbered 10 to 1. Your homeworld is surrounded. Your colonies have fallen. What could you possibly hope to accomplish?" "We're going to show you something about humans that your intelligence reports apparently missed," Chen replied. "We don't know how to quit, and when we're backed into a corner, we don't just fight harder, we fight smarter and dirtier, and with a level of creativity that's going to make your worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams." The transmission cut. Zaxthal stared at the empty screen, feeling something he'd never experienced before. It started as a cold sensation in his primary stomach and spread through his carapace like ice water. His species had evolved from apex predators on Kethar Prime, beings that had known no fear for millions of years. But this feeling, this was fear. "Tactical analysis," he barked, trying to shake off the unfamiliar sensation. "Sir, human fleet movements are irregular," reported his tactical officer, Subcommander Greln. "They're not following standard retreat patterns. In fact, they appear to be advancing on multiple vectors simultaneously." "Advancing into our formations." "Yes, sir, and they're broadcasting something on all frequencies. It appears to be music." Zaxthal's compound eyes focused on the tactical display. The human ships were indeed moving forward, but not in any formation that made strategic sense. They were weaving between his dreadnoughts like insects, too small to waste heavy weapons on, too numerous to ignore. "What kind of music?" he asked. Lieutenant Veska's skin color shifted to a pale blue, the Catharian equivalent of confusion. "The translation matrix is struggling with it, sir. Something about angels and demons, and a significant amount of profanity." The first human ship reached weapons range. It was a small craft, barely larger than a Catharian shuttle, with what appeared to be additional armor welded onto its hull in rough patches. Zaxthal expected it to fire its puny weapons and retreat. Instead, it accelerated. "Sir, that human vessel is on a collision course with the dreadnought Kelvas," reported Greln. "Hail them, warn them off." "No response, sir. They're singing louder." Zaxthal watched in horror as the tiny human ship slammed directly into the Kelvas's main reactor housing. The explosion was small by dreadnought standards, but it was precisely placed. The Kelvas's shields flickered and died. "One ship, sir," whispered Greln. "One ship and they took out a dreadnought's defenses." "It's a fluke. Continue the advance." But it wasn't a fluke. Across the battlefield, human ships were pulling the same maneuver. Not all of them succeeded, but enough did to create gaps in the Dominion formation. And through those gaps came larger human vessels, firing those primitive kinetic weapons with devastating effect against unshielded hulls. "Commander," Veska called out, her voice tight with something that might have been panic. "We're receiving reports from the surface of Earth." "What kind of reports?" "Our ground forces are requesting immediate evacuation." Zaxthal's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Evacuation? We have 5 divisions on the surface. The humans have no military infrastructure left." "Sir, you need to see this." The main screen shifted to show footage from a helmet camera worn by one of their ground troops. The view was shaky, obviously from a soldier in full retreat. Around him, other Catharian warriors were running through what appeared to be the ruins of a human city. "Report, soldier," Zaxthal commanded. "Sir, the humans, they're everywhere. In the buildings, in the sewers, in the rubble. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They use the terrain against us. They've turned their own destroyed city into a weapon." The camera view swung around, showing a human figure on top of a ruined skyscraper. The human was elderly, gray-haired, and wearing what appeared to be civilian clothing. In his hands was a primitive rocket launcher that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. "Incoming," the soldier screamed. The missile struck a Catharian armored vehicle with perfect precision, sending shrapnel in all directions. But what disturbed Zaxthal wasn't the accuracy of the shot. It was the sound that came after laughter. The old human was laughing as he reloaded his improvised weapon. "Sir, there's more," the soldier continued. "The children, the human children they're making weapons, teaching each other to fight. A group of them took out our supply depot with nothing but chemical explosives they made from cleaning supplies." "How old were these children?" "The eldest couldn't have been more than 12 rotations, sir. The youngest, maybe 6. Zaxthal felt that cold sensation in his stomach again. On Kethar Prime, children were protected, hidden away until they reached maturity. But human children were apparently joining the fight with the same savage determination as their adults. "Commander," Greln interrupted, "we have another problem. The human fleet has changed tactics again." The tactical display showed a sight that defied all military logic. The remaining human ships had formed a sphere around Earth, with each vessel pointing outward toward the Dominion fleet. But instead of maintaining defensive positions, they were slowly expanding that sphere, pushing outward in all directions simultaneously. "What are they trying to accomplish?" Zaxthal muttered. His answer came in the form of another transmission from Admiral Chen. This time, her background wasn't the bridge of her ship. She was standing on what appeared to be the surface of Earth in the middle of a battle zone. Explosions could be seen in the distance, and the constant chatter of weapons fire filled the audio. "Commander Zaxthal," she said, her voice surprisingly calm, "I wanted you to see this, to understand what you're really fighting." The camera pulled back, revealing the full scope of the scene. Admiral Chen was standing in the center of what had once been a major human city. The buildings were destroyed, the streets were cratered, and smoke rose from dozens of fires. But the streets weren't empty. They were filled with humans, thousands of them. Men, women, children, elderly, all of them armed with whatever weapons they could find or make. They weren't cowering in shelters or fleeing in panic. They were advancing, moving through their own ruined city toward Catharian positions with the methodical determination of a force that had absolutely nothing left to lose. "You see, Commander, you've made a fundamental miscalculation about our species," Chen continued. "You assume that because our technology is primitive, our spirit would be primitive too. But you're fighting people who clawed their way to the top of the food chain on a world that was actively trying to kill them. You're fighting descendants of creatures who survived ice ages, plagues, wars that consumed entire continents, and natural disasters that would have wiped out most species." A young human child, couldn't have been more than 10 years old, ran past Chen carrying what appeared to be a homemade grenade. The child waved at the camera and grinned before disappearing into the ruins. "Every human you see down here has ancestors who survived when survival should have been impossible. We're not just fighting for our world, Commander. We're fighting because it's what we do. It's what we've always done." The transmission shifted to show aerial footage of the battle. From above, the scope of the human resistance was truly visible. The entire city had become a single, vast fortification. Every building was a bunker, every street was a firing position, every piece of rubble was cover for human fighters. But what struck Zaxthal most wasn't the tactical situation. It was the movement patterns of the human fighters. They weren't retreating toward defensible positions or trying to escape. They were flowing like water around Catharian positions, constantly attacking from unexpected angles, disappearing and reappearing in ways that seemed impossible. "Sir," Greln said quietly, "our ground forces report that humans are emerging from the sewer systems, the subway tunnels, even from inside the walls of buildings we've already cleared. They're using infrastructure we don't understand, moving through spaces we didn't know existed." "It gets worse, Commander," Admiral Chen's voice continued from the transmission. "What you're seeing here isn't our military. Our actual military was evacuated to secure positions days ago. What you're fighting now are civilians. Shop owners, teachers, accountants, children, grandparents, people who have never held a weapon in their lives until you arrived." The camera focused on a group of humans who appeared to be setting up an ambush. An elderly woman was directing two teenagers in the placement of what looked like improvised explosives. None of them wore uniforms. None of them moved like trained soldiers. But they worked with an efficiency that spoke of natural talent for violence that had never been fully suppressed. "Every species you've conquered before understood the logic of surrender," Chen continued. "When the cost became too high, when the losses became unbearable, they made the rational choice to submit. But humans don't think like that. When the cost becomes unbearable, we don't surrender, we get angry. And when humans get angry, we don't just fight harder, we fight smarter, we adapt, we innovate, we find ways to turn our weaknesses into strengths." The transmission cut to another feed, this one from space. It showed one of the human ships that had supposedly been destroyed earlier. But instead of floating dead in space, it was still moving, still fighting. Its hull was breached in dozens of places, its engines were dark, and massive sections of its superstructure were simply gone. But somehow it was still firing weapons. "That's the UES Defiance," Chen said with obvious pride. 90% casualties, life support failed, main power offline. The crew is fighting in vacuum suits using manual controls and weapons powered by backup batteries. They've been fighting like that for 6 hours. Zaxthal's tactical display confirmed what he was seeing. The Defiance shouldn't have been capable of anything more than drifting, but it was actively engaging Catharian vessels with a level of precision that suggested experienced gunners. "How?" he whispered. As if she'd heard him, Chen answered. "Because they're humans, Commander. Because when everything else fails, when all the technology stops working and all the advantages are gone, we still have the one thing that evolution gave us that makes us dangerous. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten." The feed switched again, showing the interior of what was clearly a damaged human ship. The corridors were dark, filled with smoke, and obviously depressurized. But human crew members were still at their posts, working in full environmental suits, maintaining their weapon systems through methods that looked more like primitive mechanical engineering than advanced technology. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Veska, her voice barely a whisper, "long-range sensors are detecting something unusual." "What kind of unusual?" "Ships, sir, hundreds of them approaching from the outer system, but they're not showing on any of our databases. The energy signatures are wrong." Zaxthal's compound eyes focused on the sensor data streaming across his displays. The approaching ships were definitely human in design, but they looked different from the vessels they'd been fighting. These were larger, more heavily armed, and they were moving faster than human technology should have allowed. Analysis Greln. "Sir, these appear to be human vessels, but they've been modified extensively. The energy signatures suggest they're using a combination of human and alien technology. Some of it appears to be Veltari crystal matrix systems. Some of it looks like Drakmor plasma conduits. And some of it," he paused, his skin shifting to a deep purple, "some of it appears to be Catharian." "That's impossible. No species has ever successfully reverse-engineered Catharian technology." "Sir, with respect, no species has ever had reason to try this hard." The main screen activated again, showing Admiral Chen one final time. But now she was standing on the bridge of one of the approaching ships, and her expression had changed from defiant to something much more dangerous, confident. "Commander Zaxthal, allow me to introduce you to the Second Fleet of the United Earth Defense Force. You'll notice they look a bit different from our ships you've been fighting. That's because we've spent the last few weeks taking apart every piece of alien technology we could get our hands on. Catharian shield generators from your damaged ships, Veltari crystal matrices from our previous trade partners, Drakmor weapon systems from captured pirates, and we've improved on all of them. The tactical display was now showing energy readings that made no sense. The approaching human fleet was generating power levels that rivaled Catharian dreadnoughts, but from ships that had started as primitive human designs. You see, Commander, you've been fighting the wrong enemy. You thought you were fighting human military forces. But what you've actually been fighting is human civilians defending their home with whatever weapons they could find. Our actual military has been busy. The first of the modified human ships entered weapons range, and Zaxthal's universe changed forever. The ship fired what appeared to be a standard human kinetic weapon, but the projectile struck his dreadnought's shields with the force of a Catharian plasma cannon. The shields held, but barely. "Impossible," he whispered. "Not impossible, Commander. Inevitable. You've just learned the most important thing about humans that your intelligence services somehow missed. We don't just adapt to threats. We absorb them. We take whatever you throw at us, we figure out how it works, and then we make it better." The human ship fired again, and this time the weapon was clearly of Catharian design. But it was faster, more powerful, and more accurate than anything in the Dominion arsenal. "We've been studying you, Commander. Every piece of debris from your ships, every weapon signature from your attacks, every tactical pattern in your formations. And we've been learning. Now we're going to teach you something about humans that no other species has lived long enough to report back to their commanders." The modified human fleet began to spread out, forming attack formations that were unmistakably human in their aggressive creativity, but executed with alien technology that had been improved beyond recognition. "When humans get cornered, Commander, we don't just fight back, we evolve." The battle for Earth had become something beyond Zaxthal's understanding. What had begun as a routine conquest was now a nightmare of impossible tactics and technology that defied everything he knew about warfare. The modified human fleet struck the Dominion formation like a virus, spreading chaos wherever they went. Their ships moved with alien grace, powered by hybrid engines that combined Catharian antimatter cores with human fusion drives. Their weapons fired projectiles wrapped in Veltari energy fields, while their shields flickered with patterns that suggested they had somehow merged human industrial capacity with crystalline alien technology. But what terrified Zaxthal most wasn't the technology, it was the humans themselves. "Commander, we're receiving surrender requests," Lieutenant Veska reported, her forearms trembling as they worked the controls. "From the humans?" Zaxthal asked hopefully. "No, sir, from our own ships." The main tactical display showed the scope of the disaster. 3 Catharian dreadnoughts had already been disabled, their crews evacuated to nearby vessels. 2 more were reporting critical damage and requesting permission to withdraw. The humans weren't just winning, they were learning how to win better with every passing minute. "Put me through to Captain Morgeth on the Void Striker," Zaxthal commanded. The screen flickered, revealing the bridge of one of his most experienced commanders. Captain Morgeth was a veteran of 12 conquest campaigns, a warrior whose tactical brilliance had brought down entire star systems. Now, his carapace was cracked from stress fractures, and his compound eyes showed the telltale signs of combat fatigue. "Commander, you need to order a general retreat," Morgeth said without preamble. "These humans are not fighting like any species we've encountered. They're not trying to win in any traditional sense. They're trying to learn." "Explain." "Sir, they're deliberately targeting our weakest ships with their most experimental weapons. When those weapons fail, they analyze the failure and modify their approach in real time. When they succeed, they immediately transmit the data to their entire fleet. They're using this battle as a testing ground for technology they're developing as we fight." As if to prove his point, a human ship on the tactical display fired what appeared to be a modified Catharian plasma lance at a Dominion cruiser. The weapon missed its target, but struck an asteroid instead. Within seconds, every human ship in the fleet had adjusted their firing solutions based on that single missed shot. "They're not just fighting us, sir. They're studying us. Every weapon we fire gives them data about our capabilities. Every maneuver we make teaches them about our tactics. And somehow, they're processing that information faster than our own analysis computers." Zaxthal was about to respond when alarms began sounding throughout his ship. "Report." "Sir, we have intruders," announced his security chief. "Multiple breaches in the lower decks. The intruders appear to be human." Impossible. How did humans get aboard a Catharian dreadnought? His answer came in the form of security footage displayed on the main screen. The images showed human figures moving through the corridors of his ship, but they weren't moving like boarding parties. They were moving like they belonged there, navigating the alien architecture with an ease that suggested they had studied Catharian ship designs extensively. But what made Zaxthal's blood run cold wasn't their familiarity with his ship's layout. It was their equipment. The humans were wearing what appeared to be modified Catharian environmental suits, carrying weapons that looked like they had been assembled from parts of different alien technologies, and using tools that should have been impossible for their species to operate. "Security team to Deck 7, he ordered. "Sir, we've already dispatched 3 security teams. The humans are..." "They're not engaging in direct combat. They're sabotaging systems and then disappearing into areas of the ship that shouldn't be accessible." The security footage showed one of the human intruders working on what appeared to be a primary power conduit. But instead of trying to destroy it, the human was installing something, a small device that looked like a combination of human electronics and Catharian crystal technology. "What are they installing?" Zaxthal demanded. "Unknown, sir, but preliminary scans suggest it's some kind of monitoring device. They appear to be gathering real-time data about our ship systems." Across the fleet, similar reports were coming in. Human boarding parties weren't trying to capture Catharian ships or kill their crews. They were collecting information, studying alien technology from the inside, and somehow transmitting that data back to their fleet in real time. "Commander," Greln called out, his voice tight with something that might have been admiration, "you need to see this." The tactical display shifted to show a detailed analysis of human fleet movements over the past hour. What Zaxthal saw defied everything he understood about military strategy. The human ships weren't trying to destroy the Dominion fleet. They were hurting it. Every attack, every maneuver, every tactical decision was designed to force the Catharian ships into specific positions, and those positions formed a pattern that looked disturbingly familiar. "Sir, the humans are recreating the Battle of Veltara Prime." Zaxthal's mandibles clicked in recognition. The Battle of Veltara Prime was a legendary Catharian victory from 3 centuries ago, studied in military academies across the Dominion as an example of perfect tactical execution. But somehow, the humans had not only learned about that battle, but were using Catharian ships as unwilling participants in a recreation of it. "How could they possibly know about Veltara Prime?" "Sir, our analysis suggests they've been monitoring Dominion communication channels for far longer than we realized. They may have access to our historical military databases." Before Zaxthal could respond, his communication officer announced an incoming transmission. "Sir, it's Admiral Chen again." The screen showed Chen standing in what appeared to be the command center of one of the modified human ships. Behind her, Zaxthal could see displays showing real-time data about Catharian ship movements, power levels, and weapon signatures. Information that should have been impossible for humans to access. "Commander Zaxthal," Chen said, her tone almost conversational now. "I hope you're beginning to understand what you're dealing with. You've been fighting humans who had weeks to prepare for your arrival, but we've been preparing for this fight for much longer than that." The view behind Chen shifted, revealing the scope of the human command center. The walls were covered with displays showing detailed analyses of dozens of different alien species, their technologies, their tactics, their weaknesses. And at the center of it all was a massive 3-dimensional map that showed every Dominion ship movement for the past several decades. "You see, Commander, humans have been watching the Dominion for years. Every conquest you've made, every species you've defeated, every tactic you've used, we've been studying it all, preparing for the day when you inevitably came for us." One of the displays showed footage from previous Dominion conquests. Zaxthal recognized battles from Drakmor, Veltari Space, and a dozen other systems. But the footage wasn't from Dominion sources. It was from human observation posts, hidden monitoring stations, and infiltration teams that had apparently been watching Dominion operations across the galaxy. "We knew we couldn't match your technology," Chen continued. "So we developed something better than technology. We developed understanding. We know how every ship in your fleet operates. We know the personal combat preferences of your commanders. We know the psychological profiles of your species and exactly how you respond to different types of pressure." The display shifted to show detailed dossiers on Catharian commanders, including Zaxthal himself. The information was disturbingly complete, everything from his tactical preferences to his physiological responses to stress. For example, we know that you, Commander Zaxthal, prefer classical encirclement tactics, but tend to leave your flanks exposed when facing technologically inferior opponents. We know that your species experiences something analogous to panic when confronted with tactics you don't understand. And we know that Catharian command doctrine prioritizes preservation of command vessels over tactical objectives. As she spoke, human ships began implementing exactly the tactics she described. They struck at the flanks of the Dominion formation while implementing completely alien attack patterns that seemed to have no logic or structure. And throughout the fleet, Catharian commanders began making exactly the defensive choices that Chen was predicting. But here's what we've learned that's really interesting, Commander. Your species isn't actually superior to the ones you've conquered. You're just more aggressive and better organized. Your technology isn't more advanced, it's just more standardized. Your tactics aren't more brilliant, they're just more rigid. One of the human ships executed a maneuver that involved rotating along 3 axes simultaneously while firing weapons in 4 different directions. It was completely impractical by conventional standards, but it confused Catharian targeting computers long enough for the human vessel to disable 2 Dominion ships before they could respond. The species you've conquered in the past surrendered because they were fighting you on your terms, using tactics you understood with goals you could predict. But humans don't work that way. We don't fight to win according to your definition of victory. We fight to survive, and survival doesn't require following rules. The tactical display now showed the true scope of what the humans had accomplished. They had effectively surrounded the Dominion fleet using ships that had started the battle outnumbered 10-1. But they hadn't done it through superior firepower. They had done it through superior adaptation. Every time a human ship was destroyed, its wreckage was immediately recovered by other human vessels and recycled into new weapons or defenses. Every time a Catharian weapon proved effective, the humans immediately developed countermeasures and transmitted them to their entire fleet. They were evolving their tactics in real time, turning the battle itself into an accelerated development process. "Commander, we need to withdraw," Captain Morgoth's voice cut through the communication channel. "My tactical officers estimate that if current trends continue, the humans will have reverse-engineered our entire technology base within the next 6 hours. Zaxthal was about to agree when his sensor operator announced something that made his blood freeze. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting additional human vessels approaching from multiple vectors, ships we haven't seen before." The tactical display updated to show the approaching vessels. Unlike the modified human ships already in the battle, these new arrivals looked completely alien. Their designs combined elements from dozens of different species, creating ships that shouldn't have been able to function but clearly did. "Admiral Chen," Zaxthal called out, his voice barely controlled. "What are those ships?" Chen smiled, and for the first time since the battle began, her expression showed something that might have been pity. "Those, Commander, are human ships built by species you conquered years ago. Did you really think that when you defeated the Veltari, the Drakmor, and all the others, they simply disappeared? Did you think they forgot about their homeworlds, their families, their freedom?" The approaching fleet was massive, easily 3 times larger than the Dominion force. But what made it truly terrifying wasn't its size. It was its diversity. Ships built with Veltari crystal technology flew alongside vessels powered by Drakmor plasma drives. Fighters designed with Nephim gas manipulation systems escorted cruisers that mounted weapons from a dozen different technological traditions. "Humans have a saying, Commander, the enemy of my enemy is my friend." Over the past few years, we've made a lot of friends. Every species you've conquered, every world you've stripped of resources, every civilization you've reduced to slavery, they're all out there. And they've all been waiting for someone crazy enough to actually fight the Dominion instead of surrendering to it. The new fleet began deploying in formations that no single species should have been able to coordinate. Veltari crystal ships moved in perfect harmony with Drakmor heavy cruisers. Nephim gas cloud fighters provided cover for human missile boats. The tactical coordination required for such a diverse fleet should have been impossible. "Humans didn't just study your military tactics, Commander. We studied your political methods too. We learned how you keep conquered species divided and helpless. And then we did the opposite. Instead of ruling through fear and division, we united through hope and cooperation. The communication channel suddenly filled with voices, not just human voices, but the translated communications of dozens of different species. Battle cries in languages that Zaxthal recognized from previous conquests, species that should have been broken and subdued, now coordinating attacks with the precision of a single, unified military force. "This is Captain Velana of the Crystal Reborn," came one transmission from a Veltari ship. "All Dominion vessels within range of my position are designated hostile, engaging with prejudice." "Drakmor Heavy Squadron reporting ready," announced another voice. "Plasma drives at maximum charge. We have many insults to repay." "Nephim Cloud Dancers acknowledge," whispered a third speaker. "The gas-sung revenge begins now." The combined fleet began its attack, and Zaxthal watched his carefully planned invasion turn into a complete rout. Dominion ships that had conquered these species before now found themselves facing those same species, fighting with improved technology, human tactical innovation, and the desperate fury of the enslaved, finally given a chance for revenge. "Commander," Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos, "I'm going to offer you the same terms you offered us earlier. Complete and unconditional surrender. Your fleets will stand down, your planetary forces will withdraw, and you will formally agree to the dissolution of the Dominion." The tactical display showed the true hopelessness of his situation. The Dominion fleet was surrounded, outgunned, and facing enemies who knew their capabilities better than they knew themselves. Worse, his own ships were reporting cascading system failures as human sabotage teams continued to operate throughout his fleet. "And if I refuse, then you'll learn firsthand why humans have a reputation for being vindictive when they're angry. And right now, Commander, we're very, very angry. Not just at you, but at everyone who stood by and watched while the Dominion enslaved half the galaxy." The first ships of the Allied fleet reached weapons range, and space filled with energy beams, plasma bursts, and kinetic projectiles fired with a coordination that spoke of months of preparation and training. "You have 60 seconds to decide, Commander. After that, we're going to show you what happens when you back humans and their friends into a corner with no way out." Zaxthal looked at his tactical display, at his damaged fleet, at the overwhelming force arrayed against him. And for the first time in his military career, he truly understood fear, not the brief flicker he had felt earlier, but the deep, bone-chilling terror of a predator realizing that it had finally encountered something higher on the food chain. Something that didn't just fight back, but fought smart. Something that turned every attack into a learning opportunity, every defeat into motivation for improvement, and every enemy into a potential ally. Something human. The Dominion fleet surrendered. It was not a decision that Zaxthal made lightly, but as he watched his dreadnoughts being systematically dismantled by coordinated attacks from species he had helped conquer, surrender became the only logical choice. The humans had done something that should have been impossible. They had united the galaxy's enslaved peoples into a force capable of challenging the Dominion itself. But surrender, as Zaxthal quickly learned, was just the beginning of his education about humanity. The transfer of command took place aboard a human vessel that exemplified everything he found disturbing about their species. The ship was called the Phoenix, and it appeared to have been built from the salvaged remains of vessels from dozens of different civilizations. Human engineering had somehow made this patchwork of alien technologies not only functional but superior to any single species' design. Admiral Chen met him in a conference room that perfectly captured the human approach to warfare. The table was made from polished metal salvaged from a Catharian dreadnought. The chairs were Veltari crystal formations modified for various alien anatomies. The lighting system used Drakmor plasma conduits, and coordinating it all was human technology that had somehow made these incompatible systems work in perfect harmony. "Commander Zaxthal," Chen said, gesturing to a chair that had been specifically modified for Catharian physiology. "Please sit. We have a great deal to discuss." Zaxthal remained standing. "I have come to formally surrender my fleet and transfer command to your forces. I assume you will be transporting us to prison facilities." Admiral Chen smiled, the same unsettling expression he had learned to fear. "Actually, Commander, we had something else in mind, something that I think you'll find much more interesting." The conference room's main display activated, showing a star map of the local galactic region. But it wasn't the map that caught Zaxthal's attention. It was the annotations. Human analysts had identified and tracked dozens of other hostile civilizations, species that operated like the Dominion but had so far avoided direct conflict with human space. You see, Commander, your Dominion isn't the only predatory empire in this galaxy. While you've been busy enslaving peaceful species in this region, other civilizations have been doing the same thing elsewhere. And now that we've dealt with your immediate threat, we're going to deal with theirs. A Veltari officer, Captain Velana, whom Zaxthal recognized from the earlier communications, entered the room and took a seat at the conference table. Her crystalline features showed the same grim determination that had characterized the human resistance. The hegemony of Sector has enslaved my people's cousins in the Andoral cluster, she reported. The conquest fleet of Mordak has been systematically exterminating species in the Outer Rim. The machine intelligence of Nexus has been converting entire civilizations into cybernetic drones. More officers entered the room, representatives of species Zaxthal recognized from previous Dominion conquests. Drakmor, Nephim, and others, all now wearing the insignia of what appeared to be a new type of military organization. What you're looking at, Commander, is the foundation of the Galactic Liberation Alliance, Chen explained. Every species that has suffered under Imperial domination has contributed ships, resources, and personnel to our cause. Our mission is simple: find enslaved civilizations and set them free. Zaxthal's compound eyes focused on the star map, processing the scope of what he was seeing. The humans weren't just planning to defend themselves or even to seek revenge against the Dominion. They were planning to wage war against every predatory empire in known space. You cannot possibly succeed, he said. Even if you've managed to unite the species conquered by the Dominion, the other empires are larger, more established, and more ruthless than we ever were. That's where you're wrong, Commander, said a new voice. Zaxthal turned to see a figure that made his carapace crawl with instinctive fear. It was a Drakmor warrior, easily 3 times his size, with ceremonial scars that marked him as a veteran of dozens of battles. But what made this figure terrifying wasn't his appearance, it was his insignia. He wore the rank markings of a Dominion fleet commander. Allow me to introduce Commander Grakthal, Chen said. Former Dominion officer, veteran of 8 conquest campaigns, and currently the commanding officer of the Alliance's 3rd Heavy Combat Division. You turned a Dominion commander? Zaxthal asked, his voice barely a whisper. We didn't turn him, Commander. We convinced him. It turns out that a lot of your officers weren't particularly happy with Dominion policies. When we offered them a chance to fight for liberation instead of oppression, many of them found the idea appealing. Commander Grakthal moved closer, and Zaxthal could see that the Drakmor's cybernetic implants had been modified with technology he didn't recognize. The Dominion taught us how to conquer. Admiral Chen taught us why to fight. There is a difference between warfare for domination and warfare for freedom. I prefer the latter. Admiral Chen activated another display, this one showing detailed intelligence about the various hostile empires. Over the past 6 months, we've been conducting reconnaissance missions throughout known space. What we've discovered is that most predatory civilizations operate exactly like the Dominion. They're built on fear, division, and the assumption that their subject species will never effectively resist. The display showed footage from dozens of different worlds, all showing similar scenes of oppression and exploitation. But scattered throughout were images of something new: resistance movements, underground organizations, and liberation cells that all bore the same insignia that the Alliance officers wore. We've been making contact with resistance groups throughout the galaxy, providing them with technology, training, and coordination. The same techniques we used to unite the species conquered by the Dominion work even better when applied to civilizations that are still actively fighting their oppressors. Zaxthal studied the intelligence reports, recognizing the tactical patterns. The humans weren't just randomly attacking Imperial targets. They were conducting a systematic campaign to destabilize predatory empires by supporting indigenous resistance movements. It was brilliant, efficient, and completely antithetical to traditional military doctrine. You're not building an empire, he realized. You're building a movement. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Empires can be defeated by larger empires, but movements are different. Movements spread, they adapt, they inspire, and once they reach critical mass, they become unstoppable. Captain Velana activated a holographic projector that showed real-time communications data from across the galaxy. Hundreds of different signals, originating from dozens of different star systems, all carrying the same basic message. Resistance groups requesting assistance, offering intelligence, or reporting successful liberation operations. The liberation of Veltari space was completed 3 months ago, she reported. The former Dominion colonies have been reorganized into autonomous systems with mutual defense agreements. Productivity has increased by 200% since the elimination of Dominion resource extraction policies. Drakmor Prime has been completely rebuilt, added Commander Grakthal. Our former slave populations have been integrated into our military forces as full citizens. Our combined fleet strength has tripled since joining the Alliance. Admiral Chen leaned forward, her expression becoming serious. But here's what you need to understand, Commander Zaxthal. We didn't achieve any of this through conquest. We didn't impose human rule or human culture or human technology on anyone. We offered assistance, coordination, and the chance to fight for their own freedom. Every species in the Alliance maintains complete autonomy. Every world governs itself according to its own traditions. Every military unit operates according to its own tactical preferences. The star map updated again, showing the current disposition of Alliance forces. Instead of the rigid hierarchical structure typical of Imperial fleets, the Alliance forces were organized in flexible, autonomous groups that could operate independently while maintaining coordination with the larger organization. What we've created isn't an empire, Commander. It's a confederation of free peoples united by a common goal, ensuring that no species ever again has to choose between slavery and extinction. Zaxthal studied the data, trying to find weaknesses in the human strategy. But the more he learned, the more he realized that the Alliance had systematically addressed every vulnerability that had allowed empires like the Dominion to succeed. "You're offering me a choice," he said finally. "We're offering you the same choice we offered every Dominion officer," Chen confirmed. "You can spend the rest of your life in comfortable exile on a neutral world, reflecting on your past actions and hopefully finding some measure of peace. Or you can join the Alliance and help us free the species still suffering under Imperial rule." "And if I choose the latter?" Commander Grakthal answered. "Then you will learn what it means to fight alongside humans instead of against them. You will discover that the same tactical brilliance and adaptive capability that made them so dangerous as enemies makes them invaluable as allies." The conference room fell silent as Zaxthal considered his options. Everything he had believed about warfare, about civilization, about the natural order of the galaxy had been systematically demolished by human ingenuity and determination. But instead of simply destroying the old order, the humans had built something better in its place. "There is something I need to understand," he said finally. "During our battle, I experienced something I had never felt before, fear, not just of defeat, but of you, of what you represent. Why did fighting humans affect me so profoundly?" Admiral Chen exchanged glances with the other officers before answering. "Because, Commander, you finally encountered a species that approaches conflict the same way you approach survival. Most civilizations fight to win or to avoid losing. Humans fight to continue existing. And when existence itself is threatened, humans become capable of things that other species consider impossible." She activated one final display, showing footage from the Battle of Earth. But this wasn't the tactical overview Zaxthal had seen during the fighting. This was ground-level footage of individual humans in combat, and what he saw defied everything he understood about sentient behavior. The footage showed humans continuing to fight with wounds that should have been incapacitating. It showed elderly civilians carrying improvised weapons into battles against trained soldiers. It showed children helping to build defenses while under active bombardment. But most disturbing of all, it showed humans laughing while they fought. "We don't just fight to win, Commander. We fight because fighting is what we do. It's what we've always done. And when we fight alongside allies instead of against enemies, that same relentless determination becomes a force for liberation instead of destruction." The footage shifted to show more recent scenes, Alliance forces working together to liberate enslaved worlds. Human engineers teaching Veltari technicians how to modify crystal technology. Drakmor warriors training human soldiers in advanced combat techniques. Former enemies working together with a level of cooperation that should have been impossible. You feared us because you recognized something in human nature that your own species had lost through millions of years of technological civilization, Chen continued. The willingness to do whatever it takes to survive, to adapt, to overcome. But you also feared us because you saw what happens when that willingness is directed toward protecting others instead of dominating them. Zaxthal looked around the conference room, taking in the faces of beings from a dozen different species, all united by their shared experience of liberation and their common commitment to extending that liberation to others. For the first time since his capture, he felt something other than fear or anger. He felt something that might have been hope. "If I join your alliance," he said slowly, "what guarantee do I have that you won't simply become the same kind of empire you're fighting against? What prevents humans from eventually deciding that they know what's best for all the species under their protection?" "Because that's not how humans work," Admiral Chen replied. "We don't want to rule the galaxy, Commander. We want to live in it. We want to explore it, to learn from it, to be part of something larger than ourselves. But we can't do that as long as half the galaxy is enslaved and the other half lives in fear." She stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the combined fleet that now filled the space around Earth. Ships from dozens of species moved in perfect coordination, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. The day will come when every predatory empire has fallen and every enslaved species has been liberated. When that day arrives, the alliance will dissolve itself. Each species will return to their homeworlds to build whatever kind of civilization they choose. And humans will return to Earth to continue doing what we've always done, adapting, exploring, and preparing for whatever challenges the universe decides to throw at us next. Zaxthal considered this, weighing the sincerity in her voice against everything he had learned about human nature during their conflict. Finally, he made his decision. "I will join your alliance," he said, "but not because I believe you will succeed in liberating the galaxy. I join because I have seen what humans become when they fight for something they believe in, and I want to learn how to become that kind of warrior myself." Admiral Chen smiled, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Welcome to the Alliance, Commander Zaxthal. Your first assignment will be working with our intelligence division to develop strategies for liberating the remaining Dominion slave worlds." As Zaxthal took her hand, he realized that his education in fear was complete. But his education in courage, hope, and the true meaning of strength was just beginning. Outside the viewport, ships from across the galaxy prepared for their next mission, not conquest, but liberation. And for the first time in his life, Commander Zaxthal understood what it truly meant to fight shoulder to shoulder with human soldiers. It meant fighting for something larger than victory. It meant fighting for the future itself.